In every winter, the starving and thirsty barbarian tribe from the northern mountains will overflow into the empire. Therefore, the kingdom of Alan will issue a decree summoning soldiers to send to each region's lords. At this time, the lords will have two options: send soldiers or send money. Most of them choose to send money because it is more convenient and less costly. However, for this impoverished and desolate land of Leden, neither option is available. Lord Rennie is troubled by this. Nevertheless, she tries to find a way to muster enough soldiers to send to the royal court. Rennie calculates that currently, there are 10 people from Leden officially enlisted. Therefore, they need to mobilize 3 times that number, not to mention in spring, the newly born hunting beasts will aggressively attack the villages. Thus, they need enough soldiers to protect the fortress. But if they obey the Imperial edict, there won't be enough people left to defend Leden. Suddenly, she looks up and asks Mystery, "Does the Empire know about you being here?" "Of course. Everyone in the Empire knows about that," he replies. She thinks Mystery has been to the battlefield with his father many times. He's one of the most outstanding knights in the kingdom. Perhaps Michael has spread the rumor that Mystery is in Leden. He wants to see his face when he dies on the road. Thinking this, Rennie angrily curses that vile prince. "I wonder if we can ask for help from the nearby camps? If we can get some help with the number of soldiers." But Mystery interrupts, "We can't, because the neighboring territories are all in trouble with the royal family because of us." Rennie, frustrated, asks, "What do you mean?" "Our neighbors, the Natitan territory, only sent half the number of soldiers and 2 knights, but there were only exactly 2 knights there, and one of them is the second son of the Lord. Moreover, their eldest son has died of illness. So if Leden asks them..." After hearing this, Rennie explodes in anger, shouting, "Ah! That wretched male! Does that scoundrel want to block all life from this land?" Mystery adds, "My lord, sweet words can only go so far. But, I agree with that statement." He takes a breath and continues, "It's not entirely hopeless. They could send knights from Leden to participate in the battle instead of Lord Nadenton's son." She asked, "What do you mean? Aren't you the only official knight of Leden?" Mystery replied, "I know, but I'm not a replacement." Then he turned back and looked down. "What are you looking at?" Rennie followed his gaze and saw Willam vigorously practicing swordsmanship in the training ground. "Is that Willam? Don't tell me he's..." Mystery confirmed, "Yes, my lady, he has grown much older." She exclaimed, "No, it can't be Willam, he's still..." Mystery cut in coldly, "Still what?" "My lady, I went to the battlefield with the Earl when I was 16. And someone with eyes like his isn't easy to kill, is he?" The housekeeper, Sarah, nodded and recounted, "A few days ago, that boy broke the guard sword. He's growing so fast that I've had to mend his clothes 3 times already." Mystery continued to persuade her, "You've heard it, Lady Rennie. If all Leden's soldiers are summoned, there will be riots. Appoint the child as a knight and send him to Nadenton as a hired knight." Rennie hesitated before this decision, a silent gap stretched between them. Seeing this, Mystery reassured her, "I know you care a lot about him, but don't hold anything other than a sword in his hand until the vengeance is over. In this backward territory, don't let the child ruin your plans." As Rennie remained silent, he thought to himself, "You're still too soft-hearted. I couldn't believe my ears when I heard the rumor that you stabbed the prince's foot and were imprisoned. My daughter, who bears the name Rennie, the official heir of the Lincoln family, isn't someone who can do such things. The Earl has bestowed upon her the highest position of any woman in this kingdom, so the people respect her. But perhaps, being overly protected, she wasn't taught how to become strong. Yet, that's the only way to protect Leden." Lost in thought, Mystery was taken aback when she asked, "Willam will truly become a knight?" "Yes, ma'am, basically," he replied. She furrowed her brows, muttering, "So exchanging 15 soldiers for him isn't enough money to hire a knight, but it's worth it, right?" Mystery widened his eyes in disbelief at the change in the girl he once knew. Furthermore, we're doing this to preserve the life of Lord Nadenton's second son. If we only exchange for a few soldiers, shouldn't we take another piece of land? Rennie's gaze turned sharp, like the Slayland marshes, for example? She thought to herself, the muddy bog buried with treasure in the Slayland marshes is very valuable for this exchange. Willam, oh no, win Krona, that's a worthy price for that title. The atmosphere once again became quiet, and Mystery chuckled, haha, indeed. He felt quite satisfied in his head. The Earl didn't bestow his title upon his daughter in vain. He knelt before her, obediently accepting the command, I understand, my lady. Everything will be as you wish. In a cave in Leden, today was the weekly deer hunting day. Willam eagerly asked Mystery about the fairy tale the lady had told him the previous night. Of course, Hani hates Altia because Sir Hani always interferes and tries to make her sleep. But Altia loves Hani, replied Mystery to the innocent questions of the 16-year-old boy. Willam murmured the name Anilak and still wanted to know more about this Hani. Then he asked, what happened after Anilak was born? Mystery was surprised that a quiet boy like him was asking so many questions today. He slowly recounted, Hani is the goddess of vengeance, so she's very busy because there are countless people praying for revenge. But after she gave birth to the child, she took care of Anilak for 100 days before handing the baby over to Altia. Altia's stronghold is quite far, so it took her 100 days to get there. And then she left Anilak without a hint of attachment. Willam curiously asked, is it because Hani doesn't like Altia? Mystery, with a touch of sarcasm, replied, that's right, but Hani loves the child she bore with so much difficulty. A lot. That's why she visits Altia's stronghold every year to see Anilak. And of course, Altia ignores her, because after all, Hani doesn't like men. Thinking to himself, Mystery chuckled lightly, and Hani has 2 more children with Altia. This part should only be known to adults, right? But didn't Altia already have Hani? So, wasn't that good enough? Willam murmured sadly. Mystery twisted the question back, good in what way? The woman he loves looks at him like he's vermin. How can anything be good in that situation? Suddenly, Mystery seemed to realize something when Willam unconsciously muttered, it doesn't matter to her. This kid, there's no way I don't know what he's reminiscing about. When faced with that huge deer, he showed extreme fear, his eyes were blank, and his hand holding the axe was trembling. But when I told him to chop off the deer's head, saying if you're afraid, the lady will starve, the deer's head was decisively severed. Yes, at that moment, and even before, whenever I looked into his eyes, I always felt that he only had Lady Rennie in his mind. I can't let a blind, ambitious, and cruel kid like him stay by her side. Grown-ups can't always be attached to their mothers like ducklings. Before that, you need to become a proper human being. Right at the time when the Imperial edict was issued, it's a good opportunity to separate him from Lady Rennie. Back to the present, Sarah was handing over the deed transferring ownership of the Slayland Marsh to her master, sent from Nadenton. She herself couldn't understand why she would accept such a worthless piece of land. To arrive on time for the conscription day, Leden's soldiers had to travel for 2 days. The soldiers participating in the campaign also had to prepare rations for this, so Rennie gave Mystery a valuable item to exchange for money to buy provisions. Oh my lady, she exclaimed, that's your mother's heirloom. This exquisite necklace was the only keepsake Rennie retained after the prince confiscated the Lincoln family's assets. She replied cheerfully, it's all right, thanks to this, everything will be resolved smoothly. If only I had known, I would have treated my mother better. Sarah stood by and witnessed everything, bowing respectfully. Thank you sincerely, my lady. I will find a merchant to sell it immediately. As Sarah left, Rennie realized that she respected her as the Lady of Leden. After everyone left the room, Rennie breathed a long sigh of relief. Everything is finally prepared, now there's just one thing left. She ordered, stop hiding there, come in. Willam entered the study. He hesitated, not daring to approach the lady. Rennie noticed his unusual expression and asked, "What's wrong?" Willam blushed, "Because I haven't had time to bathe, so I smell a bit, ma'am." She replied with a smile, "It's okay, come here, I'm used to the sweat smell of nights." She remembered how her father used to, paused, then stopped herself from embracing him. His expression resembled that of her father's. But Willam misunderstood, thinking she was referring to Dmistry. She joked, yes, it could be him, or it could be Dmistry, but his sweat smell was even worse than her father's. As she stopped reminiscing, she realized Willam had been standing nearby for a while. He suddenly hugged Rennie from behind. "If you don't like it, I don't like it either," being familiar with Dmistry's sweat smell. Rennie felt weary of Willam's single-minded ambition. She chuckled and teasingly asked him, "So, is this your sweat smell?" In Willam's heart, happiness bubbled up like a puppy being pampered by its owner. It's hilarious how I worried that Willam would be shocked to become a hired knight for Lord Nadenton. After all, to me, he's still just a kid. Thinking this, Rennie's heart squeezed with guilt. She felt awful for pushing a child like him into danger just for money. With a heavy heart, she softly apologized, "I'm sorry, Willam. Our territory only has 30 soldiers. If you join the battle, half of them will be gone, but the villagers might be protected from the wild beasts in the spring. But if you don't want to go..." She gripped Willam's arm tightly, despondent. "Can you understand my position?" Ultimately, she couldn't bear to be ruthless with her little pup. She held Willam's hand and said, "I can't help but order you to the battlefield because I'm the lady of this land, and I must protect the lives of the people here. Instead, I will pray for you. Every night when the moon rises before I sleep, I will pray and pray. So please fight for me." Rennie presented her father's sword before Willam and said, "This is my father's sword." He didn't have the chance to draw it before falling off his horse and passing away. "It's very important to me, so I hope you'll return with it." The gleaming sword of the Leen family reflected a part of Willam's face, while Rennie's voice regained its composure. "Because I don't just want the prince's feet, but his life, even the life of Prince Michael Alesh, must be claimed by this sword." Willam's face became stunned upon hearing these words. She continued, "So you must return with the sword, right?" The boy replied firmly, "Yes, Rennie, I will return with it." Rennie smiled contentedly, "Thank you." But then he said, according to tradition, before going to battle, they always receive handkerchiefs from the girls. She teased, "Oh my, where did you hear that old story?" "In a book," he mumbled. "All right, for you, there's nothing I wouldn't do," she said, then decisively tore a piece of fabric from her sleeve. Willam couldn't help but be surprised. "Rennie, your dress." She wrapped the fabric around the sword hilt and said, "Take it, I don't have any handkerchief, so it's special, and I only have a few clothes." Willam was deeply moved looking at the green fabric on the sword, like a promise that wherever he went, he could feel her presence right beside him. He smiled gently and thanked her. 2 days later, under Dmistry's urging, Rennie had to tear another piece of fabric from her remaining sleeve to wrap around his sword hilt. This made Willam very unhappy, but eventually, they, along with 15 soldiers, headed north. It was also the moment of victory after she stabbed Michael Alesh in the foot. Time flew by like a bullet. After Willam and Dmistry left, the third summer flooded across the entire Leen territory. Lord Nadenton happily traded the swamp for Slayland. And then, just 2 months later, he regretted it when the packaged mud became a hit. The Earl sent an envoy and didn't hesitate to ask Rennie how she knew about the mud in the swamp. Of course, she had prepared an answer, stating that this information was written in a book compiled by the first empress of the Alesh Empire. Though she didn't know why the book was in Leen, at least it clearly noted the existence of mud in the swamp, with some mentions of obscure things like magic and dragons. But regardless, thanks to the money earned from selling the mud, Leen had completely transformed, and the winters in this land had become slightly warmer. As a result, over the past 2 years, no one had died from the cold. The rapid development of Leen quickly became known to the nearby people, and they migrated to this land to live. The shortage of soldiers was also quickly resolved. When everything became more abundant, Rennie gave many gifts to Mrs. Sarah. Initially she seemed reluctant to accept them, but Rennie persuaded her, saying that without this housekeeper, she would have had a very hard time during the pastime. The eyes of the people in the territory also began to change. They became more welcoming and open-hearted towards her after her contributions to the territory. Everything was smooth except for the fact that the war had not yet ended. Typically, the war with the barbarian tribe usually started in the spring and ended before midsummer, as they needed time to plant and harvest on their land. However, the battles continued relentlessly. It was because of Willam, who had killed the son of the tribal leader. Thanks to this, the Nadentan territory also received a huge war bounty, but the northern barbarians were extremely angry. They abandoned farming to continue fighting for revenge. But it wasn't in vain, and it was also because of Willam. Not yet 20 years old, he had defeated the barbarians like a seasoned warrior. Everyone called him the Mad Dog. His deeds caught the attention of Lord Lentia. He wanted Willam to work under him at any cost. But Willam had obviously refused and bluntly stated that he wouldn't change masters, which left the Count feeling regretful. In the study, Rennie was reading the letter sent by Dmistry. Since Willam was always on the battlefield, it wasn't easy to communicate with him, so most of the situation updates came from Dmistry. Apart from being reckless on the battlefield, he is a very skilled knight. But if he were not a knight but an ordinary soldier, it would be worse because he cannot live harmoniously with others. My first disciple is like this, it's really shameful for her, all because the Lord spoiled him too much. Do you know that? Rennie chuckled teasingly, blaming others again, huh? In the last letter sent in the spring of last year, Dmistry said, the war seems to be nearing its end. 6 out of 7 tribal leaders of the barbarian tribe have died, and the tribes have been destroyed. Now they must pursue the great tribal chief to the end, so it will be even harder to communicate. I received a letter from my brother. I heard that my sister-in-law has given birth. After this dull war ends, I will take a break for a while. I have to see my nephew's face. Reading this, Rennie burst into laughter, maybe 3 days are enough. Suddenly, she noticed something inside the envelope, and there was something else stuffed in it. When she unfolded the piece of fabric, a message appeared every day, when I look at this sword, I think of you. The room fell silent. Rennie slowly bowed her head and shed tears of happiness. I miss both of you too. That evening, some news came through. The Lord of Leden, with a pained expression, delivered the news. Rennie couldn't help but feel dismayed. What did you just say? It can't be. It was the news of the death of someone she had long awaited. Speak, say it again, what did you just say? The messenger recounted, all forces were concentrated at the outer wall. However, the tide suddenly changed, and both sides focused their troops. Reinforcements couldn't reach the front base, where Mr. Dmistry was guarding alone. Rennie grasped the corner of her dress, trying to reassure herself, it's a lie. It's all lies. The trembling messenger continued, upon hearing the news, Sir Willam quickly dealt with the barbarians in front of him and tried to rescue him, but he faced the great tribal chief. And so the battle lasted longer than expected. When his axe fell on his neck, the sun had risen. Fighting alone at the first base caused Mr. Dmistry to lose his life there. Rennie hugged herself and cried out, Dmistry! I mocked when reading that letter from Dmistry, today, while he had died a week ago, huh? It's all deception. I laughed in happiness when reading the letter of the deceased. Rennie collapsed, screaming, it can't be. My childhood friend, both of them lay on the same bed and listened to my father's stories. My friend! In the end, only I am left. In memory, since I behaved the way I did in my life, it's because of me that Dmistry died. Not long after, the people of Leden were overjoyed as their loved ones returned from the battlefield after months of separation. However, not everyone was fortunate. A coffin was brought in from outside the city walls, and everyone was stunned, especially when they saw Willam's face. Isn't that the child that the Lord favored so much? It seems so, and he looks terrifyingly different. He has been rolling on the battlefield for 3 years, so of course. Quiet! He's a knight now. Keep silent, he has wielded his sword vigorously on the battlefield to deal with the barbarians. Willam's footsteps suddenly halted as he widened his eyes upon seeing that girl. Rennie had descended to the square to welcome the returning soldiers. After years apart, now all he wanted was to immediately embrace her. Rennie! Mystery, she exclaimed, rushing past him like a gust of wind. This action left Willam utterly astonished. Rennie screamed and opened the coffin lid, but it was empty. There was nothing in Mystery's coffin, as his body could not be found. She fell to her knees on the ground in despair. The surrounding soldiers, seeing this, didn't know what to do, though they were also in agony. Despite her pain, Rennie tried to contain herself so others wouldn't see. She stood up and shouted loudly, "Listen up, everyone! Congratulations on returning after the arduous battle. Everyone will be rewarded according to their merits. Furthermore, I will provide free farming land for 10 years, and we will prepare a grand feast for everyone. Let's enjoy this happiness together." The entire village cheered and celebrated the victory, now that the war had ended. Everyone was happy, except for those two. At the cemetery, on a rainy day, Mystery's brother came to bid farewell to his younger brother. But he couldn't accept the fact that there was no body in his coffin. He died as a knight of Leden. He deserves to be buried here. Mystery chose you, and that's the consequence of that choice. The preparations for the end-of-war feast and the funeral made Rennie exhausted, despite the presence of Mystery's brother. And for some reason, the heir of the Grancia family also came, making her feel even more overwhelmed. Suddenly, Rennie remembered something. After 2 years on the distant battlefield, he fought like a madman for me, so I can't just... I need to see Willam, but before that, I need to change, she thought to herself. There was a knock on the door. Come in, Rennie assumed it was Sarah coming to help her in the evening. But as the footsteps gradually approached, a strange hand touched her. The zipper at the back of your dress seems to be stuck. I guess I was too hasty. As she was about to finish that sentence, she hesitated. A deep male voice interrupted, "Is it true that you're asking for my help?" Her face flushed. "Willam. You're here?" She couldn't help but be surprised. Kid, granted, 3 years ago I used to call him that, but now there's a man standing before me. No, I can simply call him a man. No, if I were to encounter a monster in the forest, would I need to guess whether it's male or female? She blushed. I didn't realize it was you. Come on. Suddenly, Rennie's foot twisted, causing her to stumble forward. In that moment, she realized how quickly the boy from before had grown up. In the past, Willam had been a scrawny little boy. He just stood there, silently observing her stunned expression. She recalled the things he had done for her, and choked up as she apologized. Willam guarded Mystery's coffin for 3 days straight. This was the first time he experienced a farewell. He endured so much, and She sobbed, "I truly apologize, Willam. Despite my determination, when I looked at Mystery's coffin, my heart felt like it was breaking into 1,000 pieces. I neglected you like that, and it wasn't right." Willam simply responded quietly, "I'm okay. Just please say this to me, welcome back." Rennie struggled to hold back tears. Beast? How could I ever think of such a good guy as a beast? She sobbed, "You've returned safely. Willam, I'm glad you're back." "I've missed you a lot," he said. "Me too, let's continue talking," she replied. "Rennie, you don't know how much I missed you. On the battlefield, every night, I only longed for you, Rennie." His earnest words left her flustered. The next day, this young man got up early to meet Rennie and offered 100,000 alans to bring Willam back under his military command. But she coldly retorted, "How is that enough?" This rejection left the young man completely embarrassed, not knowing what to do with her refusal of such a large sum of money. He is Farhan Grantia, the heir of the Grantia family, where the conflict with the Manhwa tribe occurred. Although the funeral had ended, he still tried to find excuses to stay here. It's definitely a plot. Rennie thought cunningly. It seems like the proposal to Willam failed, so he came to find me. Of course, I will also refuse. Rennie continued her attack. Moreover, only 100,000 alans? Do you think that amount is equivalent to a knight who beheaded the chief of the Manhwa tribe before he even turned 20? Farhan, taken aback, respectfully doubled the price. I don't like it, so I won't sell, Rennie asserted seriously. If not, then lend it? Also not. But doesn't Leen lack soldiers for Willam to command? He tried to persuade. This made Rennie begin to get angry. That's so rude. Farhan persisted, raising his voice. If it's rude, then I'll continue to be rude. Even if the population increases, there are only 42 soldiers, and how can a capable knight like Willam only command in this small piece of land in Leen every day? If he comes to Glensia, in addition to the contract fee, Willam will be paid an extra 5,000 alans per year. Oh, I'll also give my sister to him, she's a beauty, she. Rennie couldn't believe her ears. What? Hold on, does that mean the Earl of Glensia already considers Willam his son-in-law? She turned to him, Willam, you. Willam bluntly declared, I don't care. Besides Rennie, I don't care about anyone else. Watching the young man from the Grantia family walk away in anger, Rennie sighed, so those annoying people were under your command, huh? You must have had to deal with a lot of trouble. Willam responded, but he's very famous on the battlefield, sir. Is that so? Rennie discreetly glanced at the young man next to her. He seems like a different person from last night. So, she tried to ask further. What about you? You look handsome like this, you must be popular with the female soldiers, right? Willam exclaimed awe and blushed. He awkwardly replied, no, I'm not. She looked at his adorable expression and burst out laughing. You liar! Then, suddenly, she reached up to his hair, and with a playful tone said, it seems like your bangs have grown quite long, they'll poke into your eyes if you don't do something about it. Shall I cut them? Before she could finish her sentence, Willam reached out, taking Rennie's hand. She was caught off guard, unable to react in time. He hesitated and said, I always thought about your words and fought for them. You told me to survive and come back. So I kept repeating that phrase. She withdrew her hand cheerfully. That's right, Willam, you did very well. He still held onto that hand, pulling it closer to him again, whispering, I have returned as you said. I will always, always survive and return. His eyes were filled with affection as he looked at her. Please give me a reward. Rennie, puzzled, asked, a reward? What do you want? Willam, mesmerized, just smiled gently. It's a bit difficult to say now. I'll tell you next time. But I'll definitely do it. Before it's too late. He kissed her hand. For sure. Before everything becomes too late. As the sun set, a fire ignited in the dark night along with angry curses. The young master of the Grantia estate was outside with a close attendant named Anengol, setting up a tent and discussing Willam. It seems like he's trying to provoke our father, he said. He said he doesn't care about anyone except Rennie. I know he's a lunatic. Remembering the day Willam beheaded the son of man-eating tribes, all the soldiers celebrated except for the Earl of Glensia. Man-eating tribes was a rebellious group, only demanding food and goods for about a month. Their appearance when descending upon Glensia was an annual event in spring, causing no harm to either side. If we give them a few warehouses of food, they will disappear on their own. So our soldiers don't need to fight and shed blood. Instead, in the name of this war, we can command up to 10,000 soldiers. It's like a fair exchange. So everything is going smoothly, right? Top of form. When Farhan saw Willam, he frowned in disbelief because he was just a child. You're the one who killed the son of the chief? Willam replied coldly, yes. I heard we could have captured him, couldn't we? Glenacia was angry. Yes? Is that all you can say? Farhan pressed his finger against his temple in frustration. You must know how valuable it is to keep hostages in war, don't you? But why did you insist on killing him in the end? Willam hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the sword of honor at his side, then unsheathed it and calmly said, that man, he touched my sword. The young master of the Glancia estate then noticed the sword carefully. It couldn't be mistaken. It was the mirror sword of Count Lincoln. Willam continued to explain, that scoundrel tried to steal my sword of honor. Surely you understand that's an unforgivable act? His eyes became fierce. To me, letting him live would be much more shameful. Farhan recalled that there was a deposed prince who had been exiled to Leden. That's why the knight standing in front of him had been hired from that territory. And that was why he had come to Leden Castle, to find a skilled warrior. Back to reality, Farhan felt disgusted. I never thought I'd be ashamed of my master. His attendant Anen asked, what are you going to do now, sir? Farhan, with his head in his hands, looked confused. Ha! I don't even know anymore. Should I bring out a picture of my sister and try again? Anen sighed, sir, do you know we'll never do that, right? Farhan exploded, then what should we do? Suddenly, they both stopped as they noticed a shadow approaching on horseback. Look! Who's that? Someone's coming, right? Farhan realized it was the person with black hair and eyes, a thin figure, and pale skin. None other than Willam. People often change after experiencing the ups and downs of the battlefield, witnessing bodies lying there several times, they gradually consider it as normal. While still fighting on the Glenna territory, Willam inadvertently heard the news that Prince Michael Alish had married someone new. A few soldiers standing nearby were chatting. They say in the capital, they're throwing a big celebration for 3 days straight, the atmosphere must be lively. Not like us in this chaotic place for a whole month. I bet the new princess must be beautiful, right? Of course, the prince kicked out his old wife already, didn't he? Ha ha! Just replacing one wife with another. The soldiers continued joking without noticing Willam behind them. She's the woman who crippled the prince's leg just because she heard people saying they should divorce. Their married life must have been so boring. But I heard she has a pretty face, not a virgin anymore, just need to marry someone. The group behind echoed, well, I should also hurry up and find a new candidate, a woman like that must scream loudly in bed. Oops! The soldiers were stunned and couldn't say a word when they saw the scene before them, a long sword thrust straight into the neck of a soldier. They were all horrified to see the wide eyes and blood flowing from his mouth. What the hell? A soldier was in extreme panic when he saw his comrade fall. The one who did the horrifying act was none other than Willam. He seemed like a mad beast, his eyes fierce as he approached his prey. Farhan's close aide, and then, witnessed the entire event. The soldiers were too shaken to speak and fell dead on the spot. The rest were terrified, shouting, what the hell are you doing, Willam? What the hell? Without much word, he swung his sword lethally at the long-haired soldier, then moved on to the next target amidst their frantic screams. Willam, like a madman, glared fiercely and shouted, you filthy people! They cried out in fear, ah! Run, run! The crowd scrambled to escape but couldn't escape the cold-blooded killer's sword. The sword swung repeatedly. Seeing Willam lose control, Dmitri quickly intervened from behind. "Hey, you madman, what are you doing?" Willam didn't turn his gaze away as Dmitri continued to shout, "They're allies. Glanatia soldiers, you know that, don't you? What are you doing?" Only the sword swung again, completing the deadline. Anzen stood frozen in horror, staring at Willam, covered in fresh blood. Willam spoke coldly. They were sentenced to death for insulting the royal family. Very persuasive. I like him. Back to reality, Anzen sat by the fire, but he still felt a chill as he remembered that moment. Seeing how deranged Willam was when speaking to his master, Anzen thought to himself that Willam's nature was already like that, not changed by the war. Suddenly, Anzen saw his lord, Glanatia, jerk and then call out in horror, "Anzen! What's wrong, sir?" Anzen, still lost in thought, replied. Anzen didn't understand what was happening. "What's going on?" he asked, as Farhan quickly went to fetch the horses. "No time for explanations, follow me quickly," Farhan said, leading Anzen away as the two disappeared into the dawn. At the mansion in Laden, Rennie groggily woke up after a long sleep. There was already bread on the dresser, as if someone had prepared it beforehand. "Huh, bread? Why is it here?" Suddenly remembering how he used to bring her bread every morning, she sighed, "Even though I'm grown up now, he still comes to the Lord's room. I guess I'll have to teach him how to behave with women again, rather than learning swordsmanship." Mystery. Lost in her thoughts, her mood suddenly darkened. Mystery, he's not in this world anymore. She muttered bitterly. That scoundrel Michael Alesh has taken away another important person from me. She silently blamed herself. If only I had stabbed him properly. If only I could go back. Suddenly, she heard a voice behind her, "If only?" And then what? She was surprised to see him standing there. "Willam, are you here?" Willam replied, "I was about to leave, but then you woke up." He approached Rennie and took her hand. "Did you sleep well?" Rennie blushed with embarrassment as Willam came too close for comfort, given her thin dress. She quickly covered herself, feeling ashamed. "Rennie, do you like land?" Willam smirked and then chuckled softly, ending with, "Well, I'll give it to you." Huh? Rennie was puzzled, not paying attention to Willam's words as she dismissed them as typical endearments from children to their parents. She accepted it eagerly as a sign of affection within the family. "All right, I'll wait for that time then," she replied happily. "Say, what if we take a stroll?" Willam hinted. "Go for a walk? Why all of a sudden?" Rennie reconsidered and realized that the weather today seemed pleasant, so she nodded in agreement. "Okay, but before that, give me some time to change. This is my room, after all." Before she could even step down from the bed, a female guard burst into the room and shouted loudly, "My lord, outside." Rennie hastily put on her clothes and followed the maid, feeling worried and uneasy. The guard pointed forward urgently, "Please hurry, that way." Rennie widened her eyes. What is this? A group of soldiers stood ready in the courtyard of the mansion. Willam's voice rang out, "I'm the one who brought them here." Rennie turned back in shock. What? All she saw was him smiling and replying, "Land, didn't you say you liked it? I've negotiated with them." Remembering last night at the campsite, Willam had proposed to the two of them, "Let me borrow Granatia's army." Here's the story. When Willam said that, Farhan was suspicious. Is this a deal? Aren't you sneaking behind the back of the deposed crown prince to come here? Willam paid no attention to those accusations and said calmly, "General Man's tribe from the north is no longer, and he must be thinking about what to do with the 10,000 soldiers mobilized for this rebellion, right?" Farhan, taken aback, responded, "If Duke Lincoln were still alive, the royals would use his army to oppress Glanatia, but he's dead, and Lincoln's army is disbanded. From now on, the royals will weaken Glen at all costs, and it'll be lucky if it just ends with disbanding the army." Seeing Farhan losing patience, Willam led straight to the point. In that case, wouldn't it be better to defeat the Empire and turn Glenna into an independent state? And then, hearing this, intervened and shouted, "Are you proposing a rebellion? Don't act like a model citizen of the Empire anymore." Willam smirked. Farhan couldn't believe it. "Is that what Mystery taught you?" Willam sighed and replied, "No, he's a good man and would never think of betrayal. If it were him, he'd propose negotiations with the royals instead." Farhan asked fiercely, "So you intend to use Glenna's army to spark a war on this land?" "I will annex the entire northeastern territory for the Lord of Leden," Willam declared. Upon hearing this, Anan trembled, while Farhan felt the plan was ludicrous. "How can we trust you and give away the soldiers of this land?" Farhan questioned skeptically. Willam mockingly remarked, "Now I understand why they call you the Fox of Grancia, even in matters of courage." Farhan angrily interjected, "What does that have to do with courage?" "It does, indeed. If successful, Glenna will become a powerful allied nation. I mean to establish control over a vast territory in the northeast through relationships with various lords." "Are you still hesitant?" Willam responded confidently. Farhan, still apprehensive, expressed his concerns. "If we do that, we will surely be more closely monitored by the Emperor." "That's not an issue because when that happens, the surveillance will disappear," Willam nonchalantly replied. Anan, sweating profusely, trembled. "What are you saying, sir? You're talking nonsense." Willam glanced at him and reminded Farhan, Anzan just sat there, feeling dejected, while they discussed matters. He didn't pay attention to what they were saying, just feeling miserable being scolded by them. Unaware of the conversation, all he saw was his master looking extremely panicked and shouting loudly, "Anan, return to Glenna immediately." As the two hurriedly rode away, Willam remained calm and composed. Those were the secrets of Willam's gift for her. Remembering it, Willam revealed a cunning smile. "Hurrah!" The soldiers cheered throughout Leden. Willam grinned and asked her, "Aren't you happy?" Rennie screamed anxiously, "We don't have the money to feed so many soldiers." "What are you doing?" Willam chuckled, "Because you said you liked land, didn't you?" "Land? They're human beings," Rennie retorted. Still composed, Willam draped his cloak over her. "Rennie," he gently called her name. Inwardly, Rennie was extremely worried. She and him had crossed paths many times, yet at this moment, his gaze was strangely different. Top of form. "I know you don't trust me like Mystery," Willam continued. "What? No, I didn't mean that. If you had as many soldiers as this, and it was Mystery, not me, you'd probably jump for joy, wouldn't you?" Willam said, feeling dejected. Rennie was somewhat puzzled, but he continued, "There's nothing to worry about when mentioning my teacher. Anyway, he's not here anymore. Rennie, I can't say I understand all your sadness and frustration. But look at Michael Alesh, who took Mystery's life from us. So let me be by your side, even if it means harboring hatred towards him." Rennie was touched by Willam's sincere words. Until now, she had always seen him as an innocent child, but she hadn't realized how much he had grown up. Willam continued his confession, "I'm doing this to reclaim what belongs to you. It's just the beginning." Rennie withdrew her hand, feeling conflicted. "I've never told you about this or about reclaiming anything. So if I want to get it back, it's something I have to do." "But you wanted that through me," Willam replied. Rennie was deeply confused and stuttered in denial, "You've got it wrong about that." "Rennie," he gently called her, as if wanting to calm her down, but despite the bright smile on his face, Willam's every word felt like a sharp knife aimed straight at her. "From the beginning, you intended to turn me into a tool." Rennie's breath felt suffocated, as if each exhale was being choked off. She could hardly believe that the boy she had raised was now confronting her with her own emotions. He continued, "So no matter what I do, you'll always be the one who raised me." Your anger will be the thunder and the storm named you. The storm has its path, but the thunder only follows it. Of course, both won't depend on each other. Willam drew his sword decisively and stood before the ranks of Glenna soldiers, resolute. I'm just paving the way for you. I only hope that the path I've cleared will satisfy you. That summer, when Leen declared territorial war, everyone mocked. They thought that the deposed prince was a lunatic, using only a common knight who was just 20 years old to go to battle. May Denton was the first territory to surrender. They believed that the land only contained cowardly individuals, so they all mocked Lord May Denton for allegedly choosing the wrong side to stand on. But when the wealthy and vast territory of Del Marine also lost to Leen, they suddenly became silent and could no longer laugh. The Attain's empire did not intervene in territorial wars unless it affected tax revenues to the national budget. Furthermore, Leen's territorial expansion happened so quickly that the royal family could hardly perceive it in time. Therefore, before that winter ended, Leen had completely controlled 6 territories. The Eastern Expeditionary Force soldiers had no fear. Initially, this army had 1,000 soldiers, but now it had increased to 2,000, and rumors linking Lord Gaelmia to the war spread quickly. Some renowned lords expressed their dissatisfaction, but it was too late. From the east of Orion to Del Marine and Paula, all neighboring lords kneeled and surrendered. Leen's knights, also known as Leen's Mad Dogs, changed their nickname to Leen's Thunder. The territories that paid the highest taxes to the empire had now become Rennie's. In the palace, Prince Michael casually suggested it would be best to revoke the order to disband the army of Count Glenia and then order him to deal with Leen. That should do it, right? After this statement, the entire meeting room was stunned. The old king explained to the prince, half of Leen's army consists of volunteer soldiers from Count Glenia. What benefit do you gain by doing so? Does that mean those soldiers will obey Count Glenia's orders if summoned? The prince asked naively. The old king exclaimed, it means very likely that Count Glenia and the deposed prince are in cahoots with each other. Yes, so shouldn't we revoke the order to disband the army, seize the soldiers from that woman, and intervene in the relationship between Leen and Grancia? Michael always had such intelligence. He made the old king even more furious. How foolish to do it now. If we allow him to establish his army as he pleases, will he withdraw the soldiers currently in Leen? It will only increase the number of new soldiers and strengthen his military power. Michael looked clueless after being lectured, but he just frowned and avoided his father's anger. The old king, frustrated, exclaimed, I'm going crazy. I have only one son, and he's utterly foolish. He has no foresight in politics. Right from the start, that boy. If only we had intervened in the Sarawak rebellion from the beginning, things wouldn't be like this. A royal council member noted that Michael had become hot-tempered since his injury and didn't care about anything except his own proposals. The old king clenched his teeth helplessly. This is the Allen Empire, the nation I rule. A close advisor later suggested, Your Majesty, as far as I know, the Lord of Leen has won many battles since acquiring an exceptional knight. Let's summon him and directly accuse him. The old king grumbled, and then what? I've heard he's an unofficial knight, pretending to be one to join the battle. Normally, such individuals wouldn't be charged if they die on the battlefield. But that doesn't mean they're innocent. The old king continued, so what? Summon him to the capital and accuse him. In Leen, a letter from the royal court had been sent, containing an order to come to the capital and have an audience with the emperor. According to the letter, the king would ensure 2 conditions, restoring the title of count to the House of Lincoln and returning the body of their deceased to Rennie. In that year, when Rennie thrust into Prince Michael's leg, the House of Lincoln suffered greatly, their titles and properties were confiscated, and all knights were ordered back to the royal court. The body of Count Lincoln was buried at a public cemetery outside the capital. Rennie silently understood these conditions were non-negotiable, tightly gripping the crystal in her hand, silently murmuring that finally, the time had come to get closer to that name, Michael, one step further. Unlike the day she was exiled to Leden, Rennie was ordered to pass through the Crystal Gate to reach the capital. The Crystal Gate, a magical device made of glass, allows users to instantly teleport from one location to another, a technology from ancient times. Magic once existed on this continent but gradually declined and disappeared over time. Queen Amorous Alesh, the founder of the Alesh Empire, created the Crystal Gate as the last sorceress of the continent. This gate was a creative product in the transportation method that brought prosperity to the continent, and only those of royal bloodline could directly pass through it. Others who wished to use the gate needed to carry a resonating crystal with them. Upon hearing this news, Rennie would carry the sword of the House of Lincoln through the gate. A guard appeared extremely stern because passing through the Crystal Gate meant abandoning weapons. Rennie stepped forward with determination, saying, "Count Molly, they are my trusted companions. I believe they will not cause any trouble." He still replied loudly, "But this is the rule for everyone who wants to pass through this gate." Rennie recalled passing through that gate when she was still the prince's wife. Upon arrival, the royal court would not appear immediately, and she was sure there would be about 2 soldiers waiting on the other side of the gate. Molly still seemed upset, "But my lord." Rennie interrupted, "Sir Moy, I have agreed to go to the capital through the Crystal Gate under the Emperor's order. But if the process is too complicated, I would rather ride a horse there." She thought to herself, Lord Molly is right to intervene, but everything must have its limits. Molly hesitated for a moment, then pointed directly at Willam and exclaimed, "But Lord Willam cannot carry a sword like that, sir. Without His Majesty's permission, one cannot bring a long sword to the capital. This rule applies even to the prince." Rennie responded firmly, "That is my father's sword. If you knew why I am going to the capital, you cannot take that sword away from my knight." After hearing this, Molly had nothing more to say, angrily leaving and reminding resentfully, "If that's what you said, then fine. I will wait at the main gate. After you're ready, bring the crystal stone." Rennie stood there, looking at him angrily and sneering, "Look at that temper." Suddenly, she noticed the young man beside Willam staring at her intently. He hesitated and said, "You protected my weapon, thank you." Rennie felt a bit embarrassed, deliberately avoiding and turning to instruct Sarah to take care of the territory while she was away. Everyone wanted their territory to expand, but in the past 6 months, Leden had grown so rapidly that an ordinary person could hardly handle everything. Willam had fought fiercely, so Sarah and Rennie had tried to manage the affairs after a series of consecutive victories. With the management system still unstable and the Lord having to leave, it was difficult for Sarah to stay and shoulder everything alone. Nevertheless, Sarah reassured her that she would return immediately after accomplishing her goal. "I still remember the day I met you. I'm not lying when I say I was very happy to welcome you here. You have brought so much to Leden, and it's time for us to support you. No matter how long it takes, just do what you need to do and come back in glory," Sarah encouraged. Rennie felt warmed by these words, sincerely grasping the woman's hand and replying, "Thank you, Sarah." Recalling the day she first set foot in Leden, she could not imagine what her life would be like. "Perhaps father tried to give me this opportunity to say don't give up, and I will never return," Rennie thought. "Willam," Rennie stepped towards him gently and said, "Yes, my lord," he replied. She looked straight into his eyes and said, "Before we leave, I have something to tell you." Remembering the day and the conversation at the fortress, Rennie had seen Willam differently. Sometimes leaning on his shoulder, she felt very reassured. But she knew Willam was no longer the child she once cherished. Although he pretended not to know anything on the surface, he was looking into her heart. Deep down, Rennie felt ashamed of his blind loyalty, which left her unable to respond. It was painful. Ever since Leden's victory over Del Marine, Rennie had only sat and listened to news of consecutive victories. Alan's war hero had never lost a battle. Rennie didn't even have the strength to manage the territories he offered her. Although she did nothing, Rennie didn't know when the vengeance had begun. "You must reward me," he demanded. "If so, then there is no other way than to give you a reward, right?" but with such achievements, what can I give you? Back to reality, Rennie looked him in the eyes and said, we are going to the capital of the Empire. This journey is no different from venturing into a wasp's nest. But before we enter, I need to trust my knight completely. Let me trust you. Rennie reached out and placed her hand over Willam's chest, whispering, you said you would avenge me for what they did to Dimitri, right? Willam immediately blushed at her gentle attitude. I trust you, so I'll tell you a truth that I've never told anyone. You don't need the crystal stone to pass through that gate. Because the blood of the Allen royal family runs in your veins, he said. Rennie raised her head to look at Willam. That's hard to believe, isn't it? Willam, you're the son of our emperor. We trust you, so please trust me, Rennie said, grasping his arm with hope that he would believe her, then continued, I was very hesitant to reveal this. But this concerns you, so I think you should know. After a few minutes of silence, Rennie's heart became restless as Willam showed no reaction. Suddenly, she noticed something at his waist. Oh, Willam, I tied it to your sword for you. It's necessary, right? Willam startled, showing concern, it's dirty and has royal blood on it. No, it's not dirty at all. Rennie replied curiously, as it seemed she had wrapped it in thicker cloth, she thought. Willam tensed, sweating, I'm sorry, I should return it to you, but I was too greedy. Rennie hugged him to comfort him. It's okay, Willam. I'm glad you appreciate my gift. That's right, no matter how much you've grown and changed, the child from back then will never disappear, Rennie said, releasing him and saying with determination, I'm sorry for using you as a tool, but I gave you my father's sword. No matter who you become in this empire, no matter what you do or how your heart changes or leaves me, as long as you keep that sword, I will always trust you. So, Willam, she said with a bright smile, come back to me anytime, okay? Willam blushed slightly, replying, yes, ma'am. I will definitely do that. In Rennie's heart, she still felt the fear of Willam's power, but she wouldn't repeat the past out of fear. Because in this life, he belonged to her. Willam blushed as she patted his head. He also had something to say to his lord. Rennie happily asked, what's the matter? Willam blushed and approached her, whispering, I already know that I am the son of the emperor. Rennie widened her eyes in disbelief. What else did Willam know and hide from her? Stay tuned for the next episode by liking and subscribing to the channel.